Welcome to What Nobody Tells You. I'm your host, James Ferrigno. Join me while we explore the truths most people never hear. Welcome to What Nobody Tells You. I'm your host, James Ferrigno. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at cooperation versus competition. I've noticed a lot of misunderstanding with this in a lot of different areas. There's different subcategories to it. So I wanted to clarify what's going on in different areas of cooperation and competition. One of the things I've noticed is that people will talk about survival of the fittest. They'll talk about the world being a jungle. I have also noticed people hailing competition as the best form of achievement, without any question or subtlety to that. And I don't believe that's the case. I think it's a little bit more complex than that, a lot more complex than that. There's a lot of different things going on, and things are also different in different areas of life, and certain things belong one place and not another. For instance, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, which applies to the survival and evolution of species, does not apply to economics. I have heard people use it to justify their actions economically or to talk about it in terms of market or corporations, but it doesn't apply in that area really at all. So that's just a complete misunderstanding or fallacy. Whether that's deliberate or whether it's just ignorance, that's for you to decide, but it could be probably either or both in different situations. Let's first look at where competition is useful. So if you look at studies and just, look at the world yourself, it looks like competition can be effective especially at the beginning. So especially in getting people motivated and for people to be able to succeed from the start. Studies have shown that people do that. But however, I would like to point out the caveat that if these studies are done in a society where competition is highly valued, they're going to be skewed towards that. If they're done in a society where cooperation is more valued, then you're going to get different results, and people will fare better with cooperation because that's what they're used to. So if you did a study, say in the United States or Europe, competition might be shown as a stronger driver for short-term goals, but you might not get that same result if you did it with, a Native American tribe. That's a good thing to keep in mind, is that even the results of these studies, for one thing, a study is just a study. It's not absolute proof of anything. To really want to prove something, you need to see a lot of different studies and a lot of different results, but it does point in that direction. There is a decent amount of information to show that that was true in Europe and the United States, though I haven't seen studies that tested people from other places around the world, so I'm not sure how that would turn out, but I just want to say it could turn out differently. Also, we see that in the market between companies, competition can drive technological advancement. Again, though, this is within a hierarchical system that's already established. So the system is built for that. That's what it's supposed to do. So the competition does work there because I think the system was built that way. If the system were to be built a different way, you might get different results. That's speculation. We don't know, but that's a distinct possibility. Within sports, this is also very structured. And in those cases, the competition can be beneficial to both drive advancements in the economy and drive individual players in sports or in other performance activities to be able to improve when they're competing against someone else. But again, this is how they were raised. It doesn't mean that that is an absolute universal truth. It means that currently that's how it generally turns out. If you look at more the psychology of it, and especially if you look at stress, there's some research and some articles that I have here in Current Psychology and from the National Institute of Health that show that cooperation will outperform competition in certain areas. Even in the cases where competition results in improvement with individuals, even if their performance is enhanced. They also perceive higher stress, and their body goes through higher stress levels, and it can be physically, emotionally, and mentally unhealthy. It's been shown that cooperative behavior can outperform competitive behavior when it comes to developing advanced, complex problem-solving skills. And if you think about it, that's how it is. Even with technology, if you look at something like space travel, the moon, there's always a whole bunch of people cooperating to get really critical, complex things done. The competition seems to work a little better with just an individual. The company is motivated by competition, which pushes the advancement of the company, but for the individuals within the company, they're going to need to be cooperating for that advancement to take place. So both of these things, cooperation and competition, are happening at different levels. And it's also been shown that workplace productivity, this is very well established, that people in the workplace are far more productive when they are cooperative. And there's endless examples of this. Some of the ones that I was able to find when I was looking, but I mean, I've known of quite a few others, is that Ford Motor Company had an experience where they had a problem with their leadership, and their executives competed between each other. So they had the management of the company was competing with each other, and they were not performing very well. They implemented a plan where they cooperated, and then that changed, and the result was breaking down that internal competition at Ford helped them boost their sales and improve their production and financial crisis that they were having in 2008. A similar thing happened at Adobe, at Goldman Sachs, and there's many examples of where companies were having their employees be competitive with each other, and that was decreasing efficiency and decreasing innovation, and success of the company was suffering as a result. And they pivoted, changed that, and then were able to be successful. So this is something that's very well documented. And I know, being a teacher myself in educational settings, cooperation really could help. Now, you can get some improvement with competition, but you give people big rewards at the end and they'll compete. But I found in the long, that works in the short run, but most kids that I've worked with will get bored of that eventually. Whereas if you have them cooperating, the cooperation itself, as we saw from like one of the studies, is its own reward. It creates pleasure for the people cooperating. So they will continue to cooperate ad infinitum. So you can get the same kind of result or better result from the cooperative activity, but it also will last for the long run. I know with the kids, they love it. You put them in groups, they cooperate, and you can do a kind of a combination thing where you have the kids cooperate in groups and then have the groups compete. But I found just the cooperation in the long run, removing most of the competitive aspects of it, had the best results for the students that I've taught. And I'm not saying that the competition has no value at all. It does in certain circumstances, as we know in sports. But with education, cooperation is going to be, in the long run, going to be really the only way to go, because if you have them competing in the long run, it's not as effective. But even so, it doesn't last in the long run. And I've seen that, and there's studies to show this as well. And even in the team sports, though the competition between the teams is something that enhances performance, and between individuals, there's also a lot of cooperation going on between the players of the same team. And the players of the same team will, if they cooperate, can tend to outperform ones that aren't using any level of cooperation. One of the things is high cooperation teams can execute very complex, fluid tactical plays that other teams are not able to do because they're not highly cooperative. It can really be beneficial even in the competitive team sports area. And what we're seeing here is that there's a place for both, but it seems long-term things between groups of people, critical innovation, all of these things come from cooperation. Competition is can be used for a structural thing that you can create for short-term gains, and within sports to allow the concept of winning to continue so that they have something to strive for. So that's part of it. But it's very complex. I can't talk about it all in one podcast, but there's a lot of different factors there. But the feeling that I get from it and what I see is that kind of cooperation is the basis point. That's the most effective way to both educate people, but also have them be able to innovate and advance, and also to help them be able to compete and win. So it's kind of the basis. The way I look at it, the cooperation is the core, and kind of the competition surrounds it. But I think it's important for people to understand that there's a balance here between these things, that cooperation is the more fundamental of the two, that competition is something that, as I said, works best in artificial situations that we create. And it's certainly not a natural thing. Naturally, people are cooperative at the core, unless they're grown up in a society where that's the norm and where there's something unhealthy going on. Unfortunately, most of the societies of the world have fairly unhealthy psychology, so you're going to see a lot of competition and things like that. But I think with healthy people in a healthy area, you're not going to see as much of that. And we can see kind of the unhealthiness with some of the examples that I mentioned earlier of people using the theory of evolution as really an excuse to be mercenary and to exploit and to use people in a very kind of Machiavellian way. And I think if we let's look at for a second just a basic overview of the origin of species, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. The first thing is that, and this is true of all scientific theories, it's right there in the name, the theory of evolution. It's a theory. It's not a fact. All these scientific theories are simply theories. They're not absolute. In fact, not only are they not absolute, science is not willing to say that they are proven, because they aren't. It's important to keep that in mind. The theory of evolution is not proven. It does seem to make sense. It does seem to play out, but how factual is it? We don't really know. I mean, when I look at it, when I read it, if you read the direct text, it makes sense, but it seems to be reasonable. But is it true? Maybe, maybe not. Really, there's three main components to it. We'll just go through it really quick. Is that there's individuals in a species, right? And each of those individuals has slightly different traits because of, whatever, their DNA changes. So then there's the struggle for existence. So it assumes that there's a fairly hostile environment with scarce resources. So the individuals in each species have to compete with each other for those resources. And then natural selection, which is the ones that, now natural selection is not the ones who don't, are just wiped out, the ones that can't, the way people talk about it, are the individuals who perform better survive and the other ones are wiped out. No, that is not what it is. It's that those genetic traits over time are passed down because there's a tendency for them to do better. Certain traits that apply to certain environments, so the environment that species is in, those individuals with the traits that fit, like a puzzle piece, fit that environment better, will tend to have more offspring that also do better, and they will pass their DNA on, so that in the long run, the species will change to fit its environment. It seems to make sense. I do see a couple possible problems with it. The assumption that the members of the species are competing with each other for all the resources, I don't think that is always true. It's certainly true a lot of the time, but I don't think it's always true. There can be species that are cooperating with each other for the resources. Like a forest, for example. And as we now know, underneath the ground, all the roots of all the trees and plants in a forest are connected to each other. and they're mainly connected by fungi, and electrical impulses go back and forth, and they communicate with each other. So a forest is actually a single organism. So you can look at, say, a redwood forest and say there's these individual members of this species, but in reality, they really aren't. It's all one thing. So a forest is not competing with itself. And it's not just the trees, it's all the plants in that forest. So the origin of species kind of falls apart there. Maybe it applies more to animals, but that does show that Darwin didn't know that. He didn't understand how a forest functions and how the importance of fungi. So he didn't incorporate that in there. So there's some weakness here in the theory of evolution. Though, the other parts of it make some amount of sense. But it says what it says. So it says that over millions of years, a species will evolve because slowly, not that they die out, like they'll use the term die out, which I think is not, it gives the wrong impression to what's happening. It's not that the individuals are dying out, it's just that the genetic material is dying out. Not the, like, I don't know if it's muskrats. It's not the muskrats themselves dying. It's the genetic material that is changing. So certain genetic traits simply aren't passed on. So to take this and say, oh, the market is a jungle, so my company has the right to push your company out of business because it's survival of the fittest, is not only absurd, but either incredibly ignorant or incredibly insane. So that's something to look out for. So to say that you are able to, kill something or destroy something because it doesn't have the right to survive because you're stronger is nothing to do with the theory of evolution, though that is claimed. It has no relationship to it. It's simply an excuse to be able to take something over or destroy something. And I think that's important because really things start with ideas. And when people have the idea that things like that are okay, that members of society should be so competitive with each other that they can let each other like fall off the edge, allow bad things to happen to people where they're harmed, where they're just losing their home or losing their job because it's survival of the fittest or competition. People should not be losing their jobs and losing their income and losing their homes because of that ridiculous, absurd, and frankly mercenary concept, and using the theory of evolution as an excuse, to be immoral, at least. I think that's a very important point to make. Also, this brings us to this idea of individualism. So there's a very popular, common thing through the years in the United States, especially the theory, there's some in Australia as well, of the frontierman and the survival of the individuals and the cowboy who just goes out with his 6-shooter and he doesn't need anybody else, or the frontier guy who conquers the mountains and fights bears. Great stories, but it's not something to base your life on. So, if you want to go fight bears and climb in mountains in Alaska, then that's your freedom. But everyone can't do that. And that isn't necessarily a model for a society. Because if you think about it, cooperation is the basis of society. Otherwise, everyone would just be fighting each other all the time. And as we looked at earlier, even animals aren't doing that. So it takes cooperation to set up organizations. It takes cooperation to have an economy. It takes cooperation to have an army. It takes cooperation to really build a bridge, to do anything, to build a company. It all takes cooperation. And it's just really the basis of human society. It's called civilization. Civilization is cooperation. It doesn't exist without it. It's absolutely fundamental. This romantic idea of the individual, is great for stories, but people are individuals. They have individual rights, individual freedoms, individual choices, of course. However, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps idea also is absurd. And again, either incredibly cruel or incredibly ignorant. If you look at people who are successful, this is another issue. People who are successful don't do it alone. And there's a lot of documentaries and things out there. They have changed in recent years. There are a lot more stories that are more realistic and will show the other people in a situation where there's a famous person. But traditionally, up until very recently, the stories about successful people, either from the recent past or from the far past or from history, have been of all these individualists who just were amazing people and they did it all on their own. And that simply is untrue, is factually incorrect. Nobody did anything on their own. Nobody does anything all on their own. I mean, for one thing, you have to have the society to support you. Otherwise, somebody's got to be growing your food. Somebody's bringing you your gasoline so you can drive your car, or hay so you can feed your horse. So you can't do absolutely everything on your own. Realistically, in a society, yes, someone could go out by themselves and survive, but they're not also going to be building a Fortune 500 company at the same time. They're just going to be trying to get food every day. So people like, Edison, great inventor, invented all these things. Well, Edison also had a lot of people behind him. Edison had a group of people who were, inventing a lot of the things for him. He also was going out, finding other people who'd had inventions and submitting patents on other people's inventions, just patenting before they did. So even if they invent, he would patent it out from underneath them, or he would purchase it from them if he could. But most of his things came from other people. Most of those inventions were not invented by him. He invented a couple things by himself, or at least participated in it, but most of it, he wasn't even a participant in the invention of it. He was good at talking to people and marketing things. This is true of everyone. I mean, Abraham Lincoln did not do everything on his own, nor did anyone else. And there's a lot of stories of the famous man, but really his wife is doing half, if not more than half of the work. That was true of Alfred Hitchcock and so many people. I can go on forever. Just look up almost anyone in history and you'll see that that's the case. So what Dale Carnegie did, he wrote in a couple of different books, and one of the main components to success in business, according to Carnegie, he calls the mastermind, which is this tight-knit group of people that you surround yourself with that are completely committed and will be able to make the decisions and work together to help the company grow and succeed. And according to him, that's absolutely necessary to become hugely successful. You have to have the mastermind. You have to have that group of people. I can see it even today with people that are growing their own businesses or working for themselves, is that if you don't have that component, things are very, very hard. I've even seen that for myself starting out with no help at all. It's an uphill battle at least. Really, your odds for success are extraordinarily low. People need to have groups. Companies need to have groups. You need that tight-knit group in order to succeed. You can't do it without it. It pretty much can't be done. It's just, how do you get the group? They can be a family group. They can be a group of friends. They can be a group of experts that you've hired because you have the money to do that. But in one way or another, you have to create that mastermind. You have to have that group. This, I think, has been sold to people, this individualist thing, because it's been sold to the population. So if you can get a lot of the population to believe that you have to do everything for yourself and succeed on your own and with nobody's help, then you will fail. You will try to do that and you will most likely fail. And if the general population, every one of them tries to do this, is generally failing, that helps the people who are already cooperating succeed, right? So often it comes from people who are billionaires and incredibly wealthy, powerful people from the aristocracy, people that have had rich parents, and they will talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and the individualist thing, and how people have to do everything for themselves. And I think the reason for that story is that they are not doing that. They're successful because they have a bunch of people. They're cooperating. They have the mastermind. They've read the Carnegie book. They're just telling you to do it because they want you to fail. That's maybe a cynical view of it, but it really does appear that way, that the people giving the advice to not cooperate are the same people that are doing the most cooperating within their group of people that will help them succeed and allow their, companies to grow and allow them to amass more and more and more wealth. So meanwhile, all these billionaires are being created and getting wealthier and wealthier. Now there's trillionaires, and other people are getting poorer and poorer. And this is one of the reasons for it, is that the people on top are cooperating. The people at the bottom have been sold this bill of goods that they should have to do everything on their own. And they're trying to do it, but they're failing because you can't really do that. So this is why unions were eventually created, and it's why they were so successful. It's because people were cooperating. They formed groups. And if you ever hear people say you need to organize, that's what they mean. You have to form a group of people that are working together. That's what organizing is. And you at least need a small core group that's running things, that's kind of organizing things at first, and then that group gets larger and larger. And optimally, you want the people in the larger group to have the same kind of positions and rights and jobs as the people in the original group. Otherwise, it'll develop its own hierarchy. And we can see this of when egalitarian, non-hierarchical unions have been created. Eventually, the powers that be will come in and turn it into a hierarchy and then take control of the top. Obviously, because you can take control of something with a hierarchy. Something without a hierarchy, it's almost impossible to take control of it. So they don't like that. So it's encouraged. That's why hierarchies are encouraged, because they're vulnerable to being co-opted, being attacked, being taken over. And so there's a real misunderstanding of what unions are and how they're effective and what they do. So originally, what unions was, and what really they have to be effective, is a group of people usually in one area of like textiles, one area, or even in a single plant. There aren't a lot of plants like that anymore, so that's not as possible as it used to be. Large groups of people that kind of work the same similar jobs or in a similar place. There's something in common, and they get together to be able to ask for better working hours, better conditions at work, and better pay. I mean, really, that's what people want, because they don't want to be overworked. They don't want to be worked to death till they're unhealthy and die, and they don't want to not have enough money to live in a society based on money. I mean, I guess now they want healthcare as well. So, because people want to stay alive and be able to eat. Imagine that. Being a member of a union, what it used to be, in large part, was really a deep commitment. It was like a marriage. So I see some unions these days where it's just a bunch of people that work at the same place and they didn't know each other, and they have nothing really much in common. And they'll just leave the union when they go to the next job, and it's not that important a thing to them. But for a union to really be successful, it needs to be like a marriage. All the people in it are committed for life, till death do us part. And they know and are connected to, and, maybe not know all of, but know a lot of the people there and are connected to them. And they know enough of the people that they can trust even the other people, because they know the people that they love those people. Like there's a connection between everybody. So that's what a union is. And then in a union, then the people can work together. And you don't want to just hire leaders that have all the power and take over, so that doesn't work. But on the same plane, you need to rotate people through the union so that they're not, whoever's chairing something, you have somebody else chair it the next day. You don't want to have permanent leaders, because then you're building a hierarchy, which successful unions didn't do. And then that can be remarkably successful. It was remarkably successful at creating weekends, creating, the 5-hour work week, the 40-hour week, which has been deteriorating because there's not very many unions anymore, and the 8-hour day, working conditions that aren't deadly. There were the textile plants around the turn of the century in New England. The average age of one of the women working there was 26. Average life expectancy. So that's how bad the working conditions were. So it's not that bad now, but that's only because of the unions. And without those union protections, and it's more than just getting the protections at work and even just getting the money. It's about people cooperating and caring about each other and being on the same page and being on the same level and understanding each other and being connected and being kind of a family group. And I think that's important for human happiness and progress in every area. It's for people to have that. And another thing that can provide a similar thing is extended families. So people with large groups, 50 people, 100 people in their extended family that they know, have a lot of support. So people can also accomplish a lot of things when they have a huge family. They have a lot of support. If they can get on the same page about something, they can accomplish a lot. And that's why there's a idea in our culture of the nuclear family and kind of getting everybody to compete with each other. And competition is then used to break up that extended family and to break up the union. And there's clearly been a concerted effort to break up the groups of people, to stop the cooperation, which that's why when I hear people talking about how great competition is exclusively, and not talking about it in an intelligent way, when they're just talking about it in a blanket way, that competition is better, competition is everything, that really gives me pause. That they don't, again, either don't understand what's going on or have some nefarious goal in mind. So it's one of the two. So stopping people from cooperating, stopping people from having extended families, stopping people from having unions, stopping people from forming groups. That's why in free societies, you have the freedom of assembly. That's why that's very important, because people need to be able to get together and talk about things. And when there's some problems, so imagine that there were some problems in our current society. I don't think we have to think very far to imagine that. So people can get together and begin to come up with solutions for that, but they have to get together. And if you're in the same locality, it tends to work better. Of course, the internet and things can be used and people can do things from distance. However, it works better with people you know. It works better with people that are closer to you. And it works better if you're committed. If it's part of your life. That's why extended families are so powerful and important. And really, that's why the union is kind of an artificial family, was so powerful in transforming the entire economy and the way that people live in the Western world. And we see some of that deteriorating now. So because a lot of those connections have been broken. A lot of that cooperation has stopped happening. And I know, just for me personally, I have a family. A lot of people, everyone broke up, moved here and there, people died. I don't really have an extended family anymore, right? So that just doesn't exist. And I know most people that I know are like that, don't have much of an extended family. I know a couple people that do, but that's really deteriorated, which makes things more difficult, just makes life more difficult. And one time, I was in the maybe early 90s, I saw Kurt Vonnegut, the author, speak at UC Irvine, and he really had a refrain throughout his entire speech. He spoke for maybe an hour and a half, and he kept saying the same phrase, get a gang, get a gang, get a gang. He said, the people running this world have gangs. The people running this world have groups. If you don't have one, you're in trouble. Get a gang. Get together with your friends. If you're not in a group, form one. Get a gang, get a gang, get a gang. So if you know who Kurt Vonnegut is, or for that matter, Dale Carnegie or Thomas Edison or any other number of people. I'm not saying I can see what Edison did. I'm not saying I respect all of his methods, because I don't. But he did use groups of people. Of course, he used them in an exploitive way, where I think it's more effective to have people who are committed and who care about each other and don't turn on each other, because then that's, competition. It's beyond competition, so they're no longer cooperating. So in the long run, you want to be able to cooperate. The deterioration of the extended family into the nuclear family, or even just to single individuals, people are lonely, people living absolutely alone. And that may be your choice. That's what you want to do. But outside, even if you live alone, have a group outside, some kind of group, even a small one, even to other people. And society is, there's a lot of different resources. If you're really smart and connected, if you start out with a bunch of money, if you're famous, there are ways around these things. If you have money or fame or both, sure, some people can make it without much other outside support. They still need somebody. Nobody does everything alone. And like I said, there's the inherent thing of, where does your food come from? Where do your clothes come from? Everyone's being supported by the rest of society. I think that's something we all carry around with us and be aware of. Even if we feel like we're alone, everything around us, everything we have is because of other people. All our money came from other people. We didn't make it. We didn't manufacture it in our garage. Other people's what it's all about. That's what it is. That's what life's about. You can maybe scrape by and survive, but you can't have a happy, good life without other people, without cooperation, without love, without connection. And when you can have a large group of people do that, and you can cooperate towards some goal, then you have a good chance of achieving that goal. Kind of stuck in the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, your odds are low. Your odds are very low. Well, thanks for spending this time with me today on What Nobody Tells You. If you found any of this helpful, please subscribe and follow so you don't miss future episodes. And for new episodes and updates, you can also join my Substack email list. So take care, and I'll see you in the next episode. Hi, guys. If you could like, subscribe, follow, share, that way I can help bring you more information and better podcasts in the future. Thanks.